I want to start with a question. Have you ever had a voice in your head that has made you feel constrained or constricted? A voice that might say, you can't do this because you're not good enough or you're not capable enough. We all have our own versions of this. Our brains are like sponges. From a young age, they're absorbing all of the words and beliefs from everyone around us, forming a view of the world and who we are in it. These words live inside our minds as if they belong to us. When I was younger, I had a dream to be a scientist. I used to sit in my garden watching ants. I loved watching how they formed in packs and moved insects around together. I found this really fascinating. I had big ideas for myself, and I was really curious about the patterns in nature. Until one day, my father looked at me with the warmth a parent has and said with a smile, "Don't worry, Lissele, you'll find a rich husband to take care of you." His well-intentioned words made me feel constrained, like I wasn't capable enough of achieving my dreams. And worst of all, it made me feel small. Throughout my childhood and teenage years, I was at war with this little voice in my head. And then my grandmother, his mother, she had a good life. My grandfather worked while she brought up the children. My mother, she had a more difficult path. Set against the backdrop of the feminist revolution, she realized that perhaps she had other choices in life, but no idea on how to take them. My mother was from the poorest region of Thailand and was living as an immigrant in England. And she wasn't able to have a proper say in any decision-making because she wasn't the breadwinner making money. After witnessing her struggles, I knew I would never want to put myself in that position when I was older. After moving abroad when I was 5 and living in Thailand, I noticed this pattern play out with all of the women around me. And when I was 15, my dad was having a crisis. He lost the majority of his money and moved me and my sister back to England and left us in a small council flat in North London. My first instinct was to feel worried, but for the first time in my life, I felt free of constraints of who I could be. Without my parents around, I had to make my own money and take care of myself. So I found myself a job in a nursery, looking after children, just like my mother and grandmother had done. I worked at the nursery for 2 years, and although I loved working with children, I knew that this wasn't the career path for me, and I wasn't challenging myself enough to grow. And then one day, the parents at the nursery all got together and gave all of the teachers a Christmas present. This present would change my world forever. It was a thank you card, and inside this thank you card was a £100 Amazon gift voucher. Now, my first instinct here was to buy myself clothes, nail polish, shoes. My second instinct, however, was telling me that I should find something that could help me get out of the nursery, where I knew I didn't really belong, and find somewhere where I did. But what could I get myself for £100 that would help me with that? Well, I bought myself a Kindle. And for me, the world opened up from there. One of the first books I ever read was about a woman who was selling vintage clothing in her living room, and from there scaled to a £100 million business in her 20s. I was so inspired by this book. And in this book, I realized that the only limitations to what I could accomplish were in my own mind. And if I believed I could achieve something, then I would. In this book, I found a new parent, a mentor, one to replace my dad's voice. And this voice said, I could achieve anything in life, as long as I believed in myself. And from there, I started to see a vision of what my life could be. And I started to see myself building my empire, living life on my own terms with financial freedom that I created for myself, traveling the world and having a beautiful villa by the sea. So, neuroscience has this cool concept called neuroplasticity, the idea that our brains are like clay in our own hands, shapeable by our own thoughts and beliefs. Imagine growing up with a set script, only to learn you can rewrite that script by choosing empowering beliefs over limiting ones. Much like selecting quests in a video game, where each challenge you overcome levels up your brain. Now, this isn't just metaphorical. It's a real-life transformation where embracing a growth mindset and choosing which part of your brain to listen to literally reshapes your brain. So when we opt for an I can over an I can't, we're not just changing our mindset, we're re-sculpting our brain towards achieving our dreams. Now, I want everybody to close their eyes for a moment. And I want you to visualize what you would dream for yourself. If there were no limitations, your absolute dream for yourself. Where are you seeing yourself? What are you doing? How do you feel? I want you to know that you can have this for yourself. You can open your eyes now. Notice what happens in your minds now. Are you fighting some limiting beliefs? Is your mind telling you, no, you can't, don't be ridiculous? Well, this is exactly what happened to me. I found myself back in the nursery, unsure of how to make a change. And then one day, I was sitting in a cafe, and a stranger came and sat next to me. He was a tall man, looked very sharp in his suit, and wore glasses. And he also worked in finance. We had a long conversation, and he asked me what I wanted to do with my life. And I told him that I didn't really know, that I was working in a nursery. And in that moment, he looked me in the eye and said, "Don't be afraid to dream big." And I decided that I would replace my dad's voice with this stranger's powerful vision for me. So I ended up quitting my job in the nursery. And with no university education, I spent 6 months sending out my CV to anyone in finance who would take it. And I got my first job at a brokerage in the City of London. I was so excited to be part of this world. I bought myself an expensive dress and came in looking sharp. And I was being overly enthusiastic and going above and beyond. During my time in the city, surrounded by loads of men in grey suits, I noticed something interesting. So I turned to my colleague and asked him, "Why are there no women working here?" He replied with a blasé voice, "Because women don't belong in this industry." His response left me speechless. I had been so excited, thinking I'd finally found a place where I belonged. And now I was being told that I didn't, purely because of my gender. I felt small again. But then I realized that I could choose to listen to these limiting beliefs of me. Or I could replace them with what that stranger told me and keep the vision of my dreams alive. My colleague's response became the fuel to my fire. It ignited a spark within me. It was my inspiration and motivation. So I started working really hard. When all of my colleagues had left to go out for drinks at the end of the working day, I took my laptop home and spent the evening finding potential clients to call the next day. I was making 200 cold calls a day. It was pretty soul-destroying, to say the least. But I knew I had to keep the bigger vision of myself alive. For 2 years running, I was top of the sales leaderboard and then had been promoted to consultant. I knew I liked finance, but I still felt like there was something else missing for me, and I wasn't challenging myself enough. And then, at 22, I had a strong desire to go to Bali. listening to the growth side of my brain where endless imagination and possibility lives. I decided to take a huge chance, quit my newly promoted job, and travel the world. And then, at the beginning, I was so nervous about this, but I knew I had to listen to my intuition. When I arrived in Bali, I was surrounded by the most beautiful rice fields, tropical jungles, nature, and in those rice fields were people working on their laptops. And I also noticed something very interesting, that it wasn't men in grey suits. In fact, it wasn't just men at all. It was both men and women working side by side on exciting projects and working happily next to each other. I finally felt happy and at peace here myself. I felt so inspired in this moment, so I took out my notebook and started writing down ideas for my new business venture. This is where my fintech consulting business was born. And I decided that I would create a company that would have both men and women working together without any societal limitations. Now, the start of my business journey was very difficult at the beginning. I suffered with a lot of anxiety, and I also had that little voice in my head that told me that I wasn't good enough, and that I wasn't capable enough either. And I also had people around me putting doubts into my mind, telling me that my business would fail within the first year, or that I should play it safe and stay in my corporate job. However, I knew that these were just voices, and I could choose to listen to these voices, or I could focus on working on my growth mindset. This is an everyday battle for me, one that involves discipline, hard work, determination, consistency, and also working on my mental health to stay in a positive flow. Fast forward 5 years later, my mastering mindset journey has not just transformed me, but it's been the bedrock of scaling to a 7-figure business, where we also incorporate diversity and inclusion at its core. And my team are heard and listened to. I was recently awarded with FinTech Businesswoman of the Year. And in 2021, I was also listed on the Forbes 30 Under 30 finance list, which was a real pinch me moment. But in my case, I may have slapped myself a few times because I thought I was dreaming. And speaking of the past, I now get to travel all over the world working from my laptop. And I also have that beautiful villa by the beach that I always dreamed of. And recognizing the power of mindset, what we also decided to put in place was mentorship, because I knew that all of my team would also have those little voices in their heads as well. You just need to learn how to manage it. It's like having a chronic illness that you have to manage every single day. So when I say, if I can do it, so can you, it's not just words of encouragement. It's a fact, backed by the science of our brains. And I'll leave you with this. A wise old man once told me when I was a teenager, don't be afraid to dream big. And this has stuck with me throughout my life. So this is from me to you. Dream big, make a plan, and take